You're good. Hello and welcome to the STARS Phase 2 Workgroup Orientation recording. This is Melissa Regal-Garrett. I'm the Policy Director for the Child Development Division, and I have Heather Madison with me providing me all kinds of technical support. So the STARS system has had a vision and a mission for quite a long time, and we revised it maybe about a year ago. And I think the real important piece here is that we do, as part of the mission, find it to be incredibly important that we think both about how this program services families and that it is a support for families in identifying quality programs, as well as supporting programs and thinking about and reflecting on how they can get better at supporting families and children's learning, growth, and development. We've been engaged in a process of evaluating and redesigning STARS since 2014. What we learned under the Early Learning Challenge Grant project that looked at the evaluation of STARS was that we needed to have some goals for the system, but also that there were some changes needed to the system. So we have goals of the changes that we are trying to accomplish here on the slide. I will say that we are pretty committed to this concept of research-based, as well as having a transparent, clear, and reliable system so that folks can really identify both in terms of programs as well as families, what it means to be a quality program in Vermont and what are the actual activities that programs have accomplished in order to be recognized at a quality level. So as I mentioned, under the Early Learning Challenge Grant Race to the Top project, we did look pretty intensively at the STARS system. We worked with a national organization called Child Trends to deploy a validation and evaluation study of the system. We were really interested in understanding not only Vermont STARS, but also what are the national trends in quality rating and improvement systems. And on the slide are some things that we learned from that work of the evaluation and validation study. The other real important piece to talk about in terms of this study is there was a work group that supported this work, and the understanding as results and data came in from Child Trends, really being able to unpack that and understand the story behind the data. But there are also a lot of providers and stakeholders that were interviewed. We went and had observers go into programs at every level of STARS to really understand and get a real clear picture of how STARS is rolling out in the state and what are people's perceptions in terms of the STARS system and its ability to reflect and convey the quality of programs in Vermont. So in terms of STARS changes, we have been working with this decision-making process all along. So as we came out of the evaluation study, we recognized that there was a real need to make some significant changes to the STARS system. And so we formed an evolution committee, and that committee has been looking at both the structure as well as the criteria in STARS. As that committee has done the work, the real digging into the system, they've been making recommendations to the STARS Oversight Committee. STARS Oversight is a committee that's existed almost since the beginning of the STARS QRAS system in Vermont, whose charge really has been all along to advise the Child Development Division in terms of the running and the operations of the STARS system. So they've been the first to really unpack recommendations that have come out of the STARS Evolution Committee, and then make final recommendations to the Child Development Division. The division is really where the final decision making is happening around these proposed changes. And internally, we have a team of folks that are receiving those recommendations. They include people that touch different aspects of the child care system. So our licensing director is there. The person that supports our specialized child care programs is there. The person that's anchoring and really supporting the administration of the STAR system is there. Our data person is there. So, folks in important roles are receiving these recommendations and really unpacking them from different perspectives in order to really ensure that as we are looking at these recommendations, we're able to make decisions that include a variety of ideas and perspectives. So last spring, we had arrived at an initial structure as well as draft criteria that we were ready to roll out and engage with the field on. One of the pieces we were really clear during that tour was that we were very solid in terms of the structure we were sharing with the field of the new system, but that we really were gathering feedback on proposed criteria, and then wanted to be able to use that criteria to be able to inform any changes moving forward. So today, a little bit later in this presentation, you're going to see how we've changed criteria based on the feedback both of the tour as well as the survey collector tool we had running at the time. And what happened is the Evolution Committee took the results of that tour and the feedback we received and went back in and dug back into those criteria and made recommended changes back to STARS Oversight, who then made recommended changes back to the Child Development Division. Where we're at right now is really at a place where we're fairly solid in terms of both the structure and the criteria at this point. But we have moved to the place of understanding that there's a lot of work left to be done on the system itself in order to be able to roll this system out. So we've formed 5 different work groups at this point to help us be able to develop materials and information to support the field when we're ready to roll with changes to the system. So these are the 5 work groups that we are we've designed really in order to help us achieve some of those pieces and parts that we feel are essential to the rollout of and success of the rollout of the redesigned STAR system. We were very thoughtful and intentional as we invited people to engage in these work groups, to think both in terms of some representation from the STARS Evolution or the STARS Oversight Committee in order to have some sustainability of and historical knowledge of how we arrived at different decisions along the way to the present structure and criteria, but also thinking very thoughtfully about the roles in the field of people that actually fill out STARS applications and ensuring that folks from a variety of those roles and positions in the field have representation on each of these work groups. So the work groups will make recommendations using research-based or evidence-informed practices whenever possible, and those recommendations will follow along the same decision-making process that the Evolution Committee used. Yeah. just pausing to allow folks to read what's on the screen because there's a lot of detail there. All right, so again, as I mentioned, the work group role and decision-making process is almost exactly the same as what we used with the evolution. Those work groups will be making recommendations to the oversight committee. That oversight committee will either then move those forward to CDD. Sometimes they may move them back to work groups for further refinement. And then eventually recommendations do end up with that CDD internal team where we exercise final decision making. We do have some expectations in terms of work groups. Well, we are asking people to make a pretty solid commitment to the work group. We've asked for meeting notes to be created using a template for each meeting that work groups engage in, and it is our intent to post those meeting notes on a fairly regular basis to the STARS Evolution website so that the work of these groups can be transparent to the field at large. We are the same way we did with the Evolution Committee, as we are rolling out these changes to the system. We are very interested in consistent communication and consistent messaging to the field. The changes are significant enough and complex enough that it's important that we are able to support people in their understanding, and the best way to do that is to ensure the consistent messaging. So this recording will, of course, be online. We're hoping that work group members that weren't part of the initial orientation will be able to come back to this recording and receive the orientation. In particular, on the next slide, we'll get started going through the criteria. But in addition to that, this is also posted for the benefit of the field to be able to get in and actually see and understand where we landed after incorporating the feedback from the spring tour on the criteria, and really want to rely on this recording as the messenger for that information. And then any concerns from work groups, really we are hoping folks will go first to your group leader. Amy Bolger will be supporting work groups on behalf of the division. And if she isn't able to help resolve concerns or ideas you may have, of course, you can always reach out to myself at the division, and I'll be happy to help ensure that things get resolved. All right, so let's jump right in. This slide hasn't changed from the spring tour, so anyone who engaged in the spring tour, you've seen this slide. As we said on that tour, we're pretty solid in terms of the structure that we're presenting for the new STAR system. So it is what we are referencing as a hybrid structure, which means at the lower levels of the system, every criteria will be met. The same criteria will be met by all programs. And the higher up in the system you are, you'll not only meet the criteria for that STAR level, but also all the criteria from the previous STAR level. In addition to that, you can see right at STAR level 1, that is a change that went into effect September 1 of 2019, where all programs that are in good regulatory standing with our child care licensing are now automatically in our system as a 1-star program. And then we will go into what the exact criteria are on the future slides, but any program that's a 2-star program will need to be in good regulatory standing and also meet all of the 2-star criteria, so on and so forth, all the way up to 4 stars, so that 4-star programs have met all the criteria at the 2- and 3-star level, as well as the ones at the 4-star level. Finally, at the 5th star, this is where there'll be a little bit more flexibility and choice for programs. We will have a menu of criteria. Each criteria will be assigned a point value. And in order to achieve 5 stars, programs will need to accumulate a certain number of points as of yet to be determined. So programs will be able to pick and choose the criteria they would like to demonstrate meeting in order to attain that 5-star level. Again, the 5-star programs will have had to have met all of the 2, 3, and 4-star criteria, as well as making those selections at the 5-star level. So at the 1-star, this is applicable to all regulated childcare. So preschool, after school, home-based programs that are in good regulatory standing now are automatically 1-star within our system. Because that is, in fact, at the base of the system, if a program's status changes to intent to revoke or intent to suspend or revocation or suspension, they will no longer be in stars at all. Those are fairly serious changes in regulatory status and really represent some pretty serious not meeting of the regulatory standards. And then the other status that could be given to a program where you would no longer be able to be in stars is provisional. But again, the provisional typically is being used right now in our system for when a program is actually coming into the system. So folks that are working to get regulated maybe meet most of the criteria and have a select few that are in the works. They might be issued a provisional license while they put the final touches in place to be able to come into full licensure status. There is the ability for licensing to change a program that's in good regulatory standing to a provisional status. But again, that would involve many serious violations or of that nature in order to shift down to provisional. The difference between per se provisional and an intent to suspend or an intent to revoke is that there would be some belief that utilization of a corrective action plan would actually it's feasible for the program to come back into compliance with our regulations. Okay, so 2 stars. These are our final draft criteria. We do intend to do another tour with the field in the fall, and expect we will receive feedback at that point. But we're fairly solid right now in terms of the criteria we are sharing with work group members in order to enable you all to be able to do your work on things like guidance manuals and applications and such. I will just pause there. We are at this point, there are 7 criteria at this level. I think the highlight here at this point really is the quality improvement plan that you'll see at the 2.7 level highlighted in yellow. We do envision that the quality improvement plan will be a tool that programs will use at all levels of stars, and that the plan itself would in fact remain the same. The structure of the plan and the different ways that programs are using the plan to look at themselves would be the same at all star levels. At the 2-star level, we're really asking programs to review their and self-assess themselves using tools of their choosing, and then reflect on that self-assessment and set some goals for the program, and that the plan would be updated annually. At future STAR levels, we've actually specified some specific assessment or tools to be used to help inform that self-assessment and then the goal-setting process for our program. But at the 2-star level, really it's about the program identifying the type of plan they want to use, the structure of that plan, and doing their own assessment and self-reflection. I'll go back here and pause for just a second so that people can take a look at this screen. It's also possible, if you're viewing this as a recording, for you to hit pause and be able to look at this screen for longer if you want to. All right, at the 3-star level, we've got 8 criteria here. You can see the quality improvement plan at the bottom that we were just discussing. At this point, we're asking for the program really to be thinking about the ways that it's supporting, in particular, families. So having the plan informed by input from staff and families, and also from results of self-assessment on practices with families. So we do envision having some approved tools for the program to conduct their self-assessment on their practices with families, and those would be spelled out in the guidance manual by the guidance manual team. In future years, again, through the STARS oversight mechanism, it'll be possible to add additional tools should we become aware of tools, or should new tools be created within the system of early childhood that we may want to see and have used. So anywhere in our criteria where you see things like STARS approved tool, or in 3.4 where you see something like STARS list of benefits, this is really intentional because all of these criteria will go into formal rule, and therefore it can't be changed unless we go through a formal rulemaking process. So by using terms like that, it really enables us to, as I said, utilize the structure of the STARS Oversight Committee to either add or subtract, for that matter, new items or old items as research and evidence-informed practices are telling us we should be looking at those. All right, at the 4-star level, we have 6 criteria at the 4-star level. This is significantly different from when we rolled out with our spring tour. We actually were on 2 slides in order to fit the criteria on the page. So you'll see some significant changes have really been made at the 4-star level for anyone that was part of the spring tour. Most significantly is you don't see at this level at this point criteria related to staff qualifications, and instead we really are focusing more heavily on relationship-based strategies to be able to help staff grow and be focused on continuous growth and development. Again, the quality improvement plan has a pretty front and center place within the 4-star level. So at this point, a program that wanted to achieve 4 stars, their plan would be informed by both the assessment at the 3-star level on their practices supporting families, as well as the assessment here at the 4-star level around program practices. And then using, again, those assessments for informing goals in their quality improvement plan. It may be that a program's results on these self-assessments are outstanding enough that there isn't goals set by the program either on their work with families or on their program practices. And that, will really look different by program, again, depending on the results of the assessment. So the requirement here isn't that there's goals set around the practices that the assessment tools are measured, but rather that the program has used those assessment tools, reflected on that, and that their quality improvement plan shows a real connection between the results and their reflection. And that may or may not mean that they've set some goals in those areas. It's also intended that those would not be the sole areas that programs would be doing self-assessment work on and reflecting and setting goals in, but these at these levels are where we are at least outlining one of the must-dos for programs. And then finally, at the 5-star level, not a lot of change here since the spring tour. Really, the the evolution committee spent a lot of time with the considerable feedback that we received on the criteria 2 through 4 levels. And so in addition to the 5 work groups that were listed on the previous slide, we also have a group of folks that are continuing from the evolution committee to work on the 5-star level and further get that hammered out and clarified. So, looking on both the rubric, which we intend for the rubric itself to go into the rule. So the rubric is a piece where that rubric will be used for us to be able to determine the value, the point value assigned to each of the criteria. So you can see some examples of criteria. As you can imagine, not every one of these criteria requires the same level of resource, whether that be financial resource or expertise or amount of staff time and commitment, level of commitment, whether that's at a board level or a leadership level versus at a classroom level of commitment. So those are some of the things that we are looking at in terms of a rubric to be able to determine why a criteria might be assigned a higher point value than another criteria. It's not our intent that programs themselves would use that criteria or that rubric. Rather, the CDD team will use that rubric to assign final point values to criteria. And then in an ongoing way, the STARS Oversight Committee would utilize that same rubric as new criteria are proposed to be added to the menu of options at the 5-star level. So, just for fun, I am going to go back to the work group slide. And talk a little bit about, each work group's work. So the application work group will really be recommending to us evidence and documentation required to achieve each criteria at each level of STARS. Really not developing the actual structure of an application, but rather be thinking about what are the potential application questions in order for programs to be able to demonstrate that they actually meet a particular criteria. So what evidence might be required or looked at, what kinds of documentation could be provided by a program to the STARS office in order to demonstrate that they meet each of the criteria. The one exception to that is the quality improvement plan, where we've felt like this is a new enough addition and a robust enough addition that has its own work group, again, to be looking at the evidence and documentation required to be able to demonstrate that they meet the criteria in STARS. We also have a guidance manual work group, and similar to the guidance manuals that have been published as companion documents to our licensing regulations, the idea around these guidance manuals is being able to provide samples of how to meet evidence, point to resources that programs can use, really think through varieties of ways that programs could be supported in being able to demonstrate and understand how they are demonstrating the evidence and the documentation that the application work group has articulated. The final two work groups are really about the programs themselves and supporting programs. So the first one, in terms of recommending supports for programs, this is thinking about time-limited supports for programs as we transition to the new system. So what would be really good and important things for us to be ensuring are available systemically for supports to programs, so that if you're a 4-star program now and you're looking at all the criteria you need to meet, how are we supporting you in understanding where you may already be meeting, where you may have gaps, and then what kind of supports would you need to be able to achieve those particular criteria. And then the final group is an incentives work group, and we're pretty excited to finally be launching this. We've been talking about this since the end of the Early Learning Challenge grant. Under the Early Learning Challenge grant, we were able to offer annual bonuses to programs who either maintained, who did maintain their STAR level. So annually, if you were able to maintain your current STAR level, you were able to receive an annual maintenance bonus. When the Early Learning Challenge grant funds went away, we made a commitment to the field that we would look at and review how are we incentivizing the field for engaging in the STAR system. And at this point, for moving up within the STAR system and then maintaining higher levels of quality. So this group is actually going to look at that, and it's not just limited to bonuses. We're really looking at what are some other incentives that could potentially be built into our system, looking external to Vermont in terms of what are other states using as incentives for engaging in their quality rating and improvement system. So really looking forward to getting the results of the work of this group so that we can start to make some decisions moving forward around where we would like to be investing and supporting programs in their ongoing engagement with this system. So with that, I will bring us all the way to the last slide, which includes our timeline. So evolution has been a long process. We've been engaged in this for a while, and rightfully so. STARS is a major system within our early childhood overall system, and it's really important that the changes we're making are done thoughtfully, that they're informed by research and evidence-based practice, that we are able to learn from the work in other states who have quality rating and improvement systems. So with that, we are in fact about halfway down this page. in the November 2019 to May 2020 timeframe, where we have work groups that are developing recommendations back to CDD on a variety of aspects to being able to support the rollout of a new system. Next summer, we will be utilizing the work of those work groups to really finalize materials. And then we do intend next fall to come out and do another more abbreviated tour to present a final draft of the structure, the criteria, and the evidence that we are proposing, and then collecting feedback from the field around those pieces, as well as the supports needed to implement the structure. We hope to bring this system to the formal promulgation process in the winter, late winter of 2020 through the spring of 2021, with the goal of at the end of the summer of 2021, we would have some final rules that were approved and filed with the Secretary of State, giving us, a few months of time to really develop and finalize materials, communicate changes, and really prepare the field and support the field in getting ready to transition to utilizing the system under the new rules. And so we have a target effective date of January 1st, 2022. I will also say that we've continued to access the support of Child Trends throughout this process, and they are continue to be supportive to Vermont as we go through this work. And one of the benefits that they bring to us is the ability to look at and predict what these changes will have for impact on programs. So it's likely that in addition to our going out back on tour in the fall, that we will also be surveying again programs based on final criteria in order to inform what Child Trends calls a virtual pilot. So telling us where programs see that they already meet criteria, where they think they could meet it given a certain time frame or support, or where they feel like criteria are far out of their reach. And with the results of that, when we roll in September, we feel like we should, of next year, we should be able to have some predictions on if you're a 4-star program under the current STAR system, what are some of the barriers and how many of you would potentially maintain 4-star status when we shifted to the new system in January of 2022. That will also tell us if additional time is needed for programs beyond January of 2022 and help in decision making around what does the phase in and transition in of this system look like after January 1, 2022. And it's very much on the table to consider a period of time when programs would be able to choose whether they were renewing their stars under the old system or whether they were going forward and reapplying or renewing under the new system. I know, I think it was 2010 when the STAR system changed previously, that there was a period of time where programs were able to choose one or the other prior to coming into utilizing the revised system fully. So again, we would want to use some data to inform a decision in terms of how long that timeline will be. So the virtual pilot survey will be an incredibly important tool to us as we move forward with decisions around this system. All right, with that, I think we've concluded our presentation here. We are absolutely open to your feedback, in fact, encourage it. So absolutely reach out to myself, Melissa Regal-Garrett, at vermont.gov. with any feedback. In addition to that, our web page on STARS Evolution on the CDD website continues to have the online collector tool for questions and feedback, and we will continue to monitor that and refresh the frequently asked questions document as is relevant to the questions that we have coming in. Thanks for engaging in our recorded PowerPoint.